Welcome back, everyone. I'm Carol Massar of Bloomberg Business Week on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV. I have a great team from Cisco getting ready with me to lead a conversation that's a really important one on sustainability and building long-term growth. It's a company that knows about it. They have been working on sustainability and implementing sustainability initiatives for many, many years. So let me bring them in. Francine Katsoudas, she is Executive Vice President. She's Chief People Policy and Purpose Officer at Cisco, and then also the Chief Financial Officer at Cisco, also Executive Vice President Scott Herren. So great to have both of you here with me. We're going to get into the sustainability, but because I have you here, I just wanted to ask you, the environment right now, there's so many questions. We have Fed Chief Jay Powell talking today saying, folks, we've got to be patient here. It's going to take longer for the economy to get back on track. Scott, may I ask you how you see the business environment, the economic environment?
Yeah, I think we see what many companies are seeing and what you see reported this morning. Business activity is picking up. We're coming out of the pandemic. It's picking up rapidly to the point now that it looks like inflation is not just something that's being projected, but something that we're actually seeing measured at this point. So I think that the business environment in general has strengthened pretty significantly, certainly from where it was during the pandemic.
And Fred, come on in on this as well, because you're dealing with the people at Cisco, right? There's so many different policies that may be changing and so on and so forth. How do you see it when you look at the economic environment, the business environment, the market environment?
Yeah, it's an interesting time because in addition to seeing a recovery across all industries, which is wonderful, you see a very active talent marketplace. You see people moving. You also see talent right now looking at how companies plan to work moving forward, and that guiding some of the decisions that they're making. And so I would just say we're seeing a ton of movement across the industry, a lot of opportunity, and candidates feeling like they really have their choice of where they're going to work and how they want their career to progress.
There's no, Fran, just to follow, there's no going back to the way it was pre-pandemic when it comes to how we work. It's different, right? It's changed.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a customer yesterday, and we were sharing that we don't believe there is any going back to where we were. We do think that both from a company perspective, but also from an employee perspective, there's a realization that we're going to work differently. Some of the research that we've done shows us now that 98% of meetings will have someone who is not in the office, so we'll have someone who is remote. And now the technology and the people practices need to accommodate that. We also see that across the industry, employees in general are saying that they want to be in the office only 2 to 3 days of the week. And so I don't think there's going back to the way that it was before.
Well, and Scott, and just final on this, what does that mean for your business? You guys, infrastructure, this is your world in terms of connecting people. Is that good or bad going forward?
Yeah, let me start by saying I think in general it's good, right? I think there's a lot of terrible outcomes from the pandemic. Obviously, no one wished for this, but I think it proved a few things that had been theorized and shown in spots previously, like hybrid work, like the ability to be effective and to lead teams effectively when they're not all sitting at their desk in the office. And so I view it just as a general societal good that's come out of this. From a business standpoint, the hybrid work and remote meetings will continue to be an upside for us at Cisco. It's to the extent that we're meeting like this, instead of sitting in a conference room, we're meeting using technology. And it uses not just our collaboration technologies and WebEx, but it uses a lot of network capacity and bandwidth, right? Inside the network, out to the cloud, and finally to the endpoint in the home. So I think in general, it's a tailwind for us.
All right, so let's talk about why you both are here, because I really want to get into this issue. And we're talking about, the initiatives that you folks have done in terms of sustainability and really how that has contributed to long-term growth. I was looking at some of the key points. You launched Cisco Networking Academy back in '97. Set your first greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal in 2006. That's 15 years ago. You've put out 16 years of sustainability reporting. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're getting ready, I believe, though, for the 17th. The reason I go through some of this, and I'm only scratching the surface, is that this is part of your DNA. It really has been for a long time. Share with us some of the history of this, of how it came together. And Fran, I want to start with you. You've been at Cisco for almost 17 years. Help me out with how it all evolved and came to be.
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, it is a big part of who we are. The Networking Academies was our first real push into understanding that through education, we could create access and careers for people around the world. And it's interesting, the Networking Academies feed all of our competitors, our peers in the marketplace, and we want that. We're trying to create careers for others. We have trained, if you can believe it, about 12.6 million students since that time. And so this is something that's incredibly important to us. I think from an employee perspective, our employees care deeply, and we want to have both impact from a business perspective, but we want to feel like we have left the world in a better place. A year ago, we created our new purpose, which is to power an inclusive future for all. And as you would imagine, this purpose will guide us as it relates to doing our part, as it relates to the digital divide, inclusion, climate, sustainability, and how we partner with governments around the globe. The interesting thing is that we put that purpose together right before we understood the impact of the pandemic. And I will tell you that it guided us through the last almost year and a half now around how we want to show up, how we want to have impact, how we want to work with our peers to address some of the biggest issues. And so I'm so proud of the team that worked on this. The fact that our first sustainability report was in 2005 is wonderful. The last thing I'll say here is I think there's a big difference too in where we are today. If you look back in the early 2000s, sustainability was something that you did in addition to your business. It felt like it sat on the side. It was powerful. But now the biggest difference is it's embedded in who we are and how we work. And you see sustainability play out in how we design products, how we think about our customers, how we innovate. And I think this is the next chapter for Cisco and many others, hopefully, because I think this is where you start to see the biggest difference.
And Scott, you're new to Cisco, but you've been in the tech industry. You were at Autodesk. The things that you're bringing to Cisco, you've been thinking about and doing for a long time. I came across this quote where you said, fundamentally, believe that climate change and sustainability is our generation's problem to solve. We don't have a lot of time anymore, do we?
No, we don't. And you know, that comment came from looking at the greatest generation and the issues that they had to solve, and you know, kind of work your way forward. This is a massive issue. This is a worldwide, it's a global issue that needs global solutions, and everybody has to take it upon themselves to be a part of the answer. I have a personal responsibility to this, and I've got a corporate responsibility to this. And I think that's the way, so when I say that, the idea is to spur more people to say, you know what, I can't do everything, but I can do something, and I need to take personal accountability for going out and doing that.
You know, Scott, I was talking with the team over at AB InBev, and they said, you know, that argument about trade-off between being sustainability versus cost, like it doesn't exist anymore. Is that true? Like when you no. So walk me through that as you guys continue to pursue strategies, how you think it through.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. I would wager to say we don't do any transaction of any size with a customer that doesn't in some way ask the question, what are your goals on sustainability? What is your progress on sustainability? Where are you on circular economy? Where are you on greenhouse gas emissions? What commitments? Like those questions are part of the business process. It's not, I think Fran nailed it with what she said earlier. This isn't a feel good, hey, we've got a skunk works going on the side, business gets tough, we shut down. That's not how it is. It's ingrained in everything we do. And it's ingrained in the way our customers select the suppliers that they want to do business with.
What has the biggest effect, you guys, in terms of having the biggest sustainability impact? You know, is it saying to your supply chain, you want to work with us? We're massive. We're a big company. Everybody wants to work with us. We'll find somebody else if you don't fall in line with these sustainable initiatives. What really pushes the impact here? And I can go to either of you. Fran, you want to take that, or Scott?
Okay. start, and Scott, please feel free to jump in. So the first thing that I would say is that I think it's so very important for us to put goals out there. And I think in the past, teams have been hesitant because this is hard, and there's such a broader ecosystem that it's hard to be really specific and feel confident that you're going to meet these goals. But I think we have to put stretch goals forward. I think Scott's going to go here in just a moment. You're absolutely right. The supply chain is a huge element of how you drive impact. It's a big area of focus for us. But I think the other thing I would say is having really clear goals around what we're trying to do from a greenhouse gas Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions perspective is really important. We put out there the goal of reducing by 60%. We're in the process now of really looking at the next set of goals that we're going to have, because these goals end in 2022. We also put out a goal to have 85% of our electricity from renewable sources. We're really close to achieving that as well. We achieved it in the US, about 8 other countries, 60% in India. We're going to keep pushing on that. And then there's a supply chain piece, and that's significant. And maybe, Scott, you want to talk to that a bit more as well?
No, I think you said it right. We need to have the moral authority to go to our supply chain partners and say, this is our expectation of you. This is what we want to see you do in terms of greenhouse gas, in terms of your own operations and the way you utilize resources, not just the amount of carbon that you emit. And so that starts with us looking at our own operations, looking at the offices that we run, looking at the power that we consume. How do we do that? Looking at the way we design products for a circular economy, looking at the amount of virgin plastic that we use. We've had focus on all these areas, and I think you have to do that first to get what I'll call the moral authority to then go to your supply chain and say, I expect the same from you. And if you want to do business with me, this is what my expectations are. And I think that's it's one of the things that was really important to me as I was looking at Cisco as a place to come and snap into this role, was where is the company as a significant hardware supply chain, but also one of the biggest software companies in the world. Where is Cisco in terms of keeping its own house in order and then having the authority to go to its supply chain? And it's one that the company has a decades-long track record on.
Well, it's interesting. First of all, I love what you say about Scope 1, Scope 2. I learned a lot in kind of prepping for this panel, but it's not just, it's directly what your impact is, right, on the climate, but also indirectly by the electricity you purchase or the trucks you use or whatever. Like, you have to think about all of those things. What's the role of government here in all of this? We recently had an article on the Bloomberg that said there's been a lot of ESG initiatives out there by a lot of folks, but we really need the government to kind of kick into a crisis mode, just like they did during COVID, to do it with the climate. And I'm curious what you all think about that. Scott, why don't you pick up on that?
I'll start. I think there are several roles and it's, when you say government, it's governments, plural, right? Because this is a global issue, and no one government is going to be able to have the impact that we need to have collectively. So it's what are government's role, right? And it does start with having a focus on it and ensuring that the electorate puts people in that have this as a focus, and then when that focus is there, that it actually gets implemented, and that there are programs put in specifically to drive toward a higher sustainability and less climate impact. And then I think it goes to something that I know I've publicly weighed in on a couple of times, which is the regulatory agencies requiring disclosure of how companies are behaving. It's not enough for us to, on a voluntary basis, and when I say us, I mean all corporates, to, on a voluntary basis, cherry pick the things that I think make me look good and push those out, put them in my sustainability report or a paragraph in my annual report. There's a wealth transfer that's going to happen from the baby boomer generation, which embarrassingly enough, I'm on the tail end of, so I'm one of them, to the next generation. And as that wealth transfer happens, there's no doubt in my mind that the recipients of that wealth, this is going to be a real deciding factor in where they decide to invest their funds. And so what does that mean? That means they need to know. There needs to be comparability, not just within an industry, across all industries, right? The easy analogy is, if I wanted to buy debt, if I wanted to buy a bond, it's very clear to me what a AA rated company is, whether it's a bank or a tech company or a transportation company. I know what AA means. We need a similar type of, beginning with the disclosure environment, but then ultimately a similar type of rating that's consistent across industries. because that's what's going to drive the investment of the wealth that is over the next 10 to 15 years going to transfer to the next generation.
All right, I know you both work together on all of this and the initiatives at Cisco. Fran, I mean, so what's the likelihood that we see anything like that, a regulatory body like an SEC, but for ESG and sustainability, so that there is an oversight and you're penalized if you mess up, right? And the investing world and the world at large knows about it. What's the likelihood we get something like that? Are you guys in Washington saying, this is what we need, and they're saying, yeah, I got too much on my plate?
What I would say is we are in Washington having this conversation. I think on a positive note, there is a tremendous amount of interest, but also pressure for us to do something differently. I do think that the government-private handhold on this is so incredibly important. Sometimes, Carol, I look to what's happening in Europe, and I see some of the more stringent regulations that are there. And I see it driving these coalitions that have to come together to get creative and to solve. And so I do think there's interest. I do think that the climate crisis that we all see now on a day-to-day basis is driving action. And I continue to think that even without that, there is a role for corporations to come together, to start to speak the same language, to adopt some of the same goals. And in doing so, we can take baby steps towards exactly what Scott was talking about.
Yeah, and Carol, to put a finer point on that, the SEC has been very vocal. The SEC and this administration has been very vocal about driving to a degree of disclosure, and I think they're taking a thoughtful approach. So under then acting chair Allison Herren and now under Chair Gensler, they've been quite focused on we will get to some mandatory level of disclosure. It's a process. Right now, there are so many different, there's TCFD and there's SASB and there's the European regulations that are driven by IFRS. It's kind of alphabet soup, but there's a number of different regimens today. We need to see those consolidated. But the SEC has absolutely got this on the agenda. They've just closed the comment period around an initial set of questions and look to have a draft out by the end of this calendar year. So I think we're going to see very specific mandatory disclosure requirements come out before this administration's over.
All right, so I'm being a little provocative. Bitcoin regulation comes first, or oversight, or this comes first?
I would say this comes first. Not that it's any easier. But I do think it's one that it's already, the wheels are already turning. It's already in process. And if you look at what's happening in Europe, it's already there. They already have, through IFRS, implemented a number of mandatory sustainability, climate change type metrics.
Yeah, even this morning, coming down with some more today out of the EU in terms of transportation. What's the conversations that the two of you have when it comes to sustainability initiatives? How does that go? How does that work? And then kind of getting the message out to the company, Fran?
Gosh, so I would say from a company perspective, Scott and I are lucky because this is a topic that our people care about quite a bit. I think in everything that we do, we tend to look at the long-term opportunity, and we're really thoughtful around all of the levers that we have. And I would say, Scott, we're also creative in that, and we're supported by efforts like what our Cisco Foundation did. So as an example, the Cisco Foundation recently dedicated $100 million over the next 10 years for us to really fast track those startups that are out there driving technology that can have significant impact on this crisis. And our investment is a long-term play. I think the beautiful thing about it is when you look at some of those investments, they're not all directly tied to Cisco. They are tied to the bigger opportunity. We just finished an internal contest that we had looking at some of the great companies that are out there. And we just had a contest on greenhouse gas emissions. And there's a company in the US called Remora that is doing great work to reduce some of the greenhouse gas emissions that are coming from semi-trucks. And we just invested $50,000. And so you'll continue to see us get incredibly creative in how we do that. But I think from a CFO, Chief People Officer perspective, we're doing our best to really balance long-term, short-term, the levers that we have, and how we engage our people because they have so many great ideas.
Yeah, I would
What about?
just add that when you think about return, which I think about a lot, as you can imagine, uh, there's another return beyond what we talked about earlier. That this is a real decision factor. It's not a check the box item. It's a real decision factor for many of our customers. There's also a return in the ability to attract talent and then retain talent because your company stands for something that people believe in, right? And when you look at the current generation that's coming out of college, they have a number of choices, right? It's the super competitive environment for acquiring talent right now. And I think having not just the wrapper of a focus on sustainability, but a decades long focus on it and really having it integrated into all of our operations, including our product design, by the way, where we design products specifically to use less electricity when they're in use, right? That's not just the way we produce it. It's our customers get that benefit. That matters, and that allows us to attract talent and then to retain it.
What, in terms of the impact that the strategy that Cisco has been pursuing for 15, 16 plus years here in terms of sustainability initiatives and reducing greenhouse gases, how do you think it's impacted the long-term growth of the company? And as you say, it's not just, it is important in terms of measuring the impact on the climate and the environment, but in terms of attracting people and just different things. And Scott, do you want to take that?
I mean,
For Fran?
certainly, yeah. I'll talk about the growth rate. I see it as something that has gone from, 10 years ago, the questions around sustainability were more check the box. They were more rote. It was more, as long as you're not doing something really atrocious, I won't use my normal example, then you qualify. It's moved from that to now everyone can check the box. And now it's how do I differentiate who really has a bought-in process? And so there's no question that it has contributed to our growth, and the absence of doing what we've done would have been a real headwind to our growth over time. And that's just talking from a sales standpoint.
Right, and I'm thinking, Fran, from your time there at Cisco, like I can imagine the conversations that went back and said, look at what we did and look at the financial impact on this in a positive way.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think we're.
Go
ahead, Scott.
Sorry, Fran.
No, all good. I was going to say we're lucky we got a head start on some of the discussions. I think in doing so, it educated our teams around things like what does Scope 1, Scope 2 mean? How do we go after the greenhouse gas issues? But where Scott was going, which I really love, is that this head start now, as it applies to the way in which we're designing our product, makes our product so much more attractive to our customers. And so the conversation that we can have with them is not only is this product the fastest, but it's also going to reduce your energy usage. And I think it's those types of numbers that are the most meaningful. And candidly, I think get our engineers really excited about what's in front of us as well.
Yeah, they have to answer those same questions, right, about what is their carbon footprint. And so to the extent that we can help them along that path, that obviously becomes an advantage.
So what's next for you guys, and what does like Sustainability 3.0? We've been talking about this a lot in the newsroom, and I've been bringing it up with a lot of our discussions at this summit. Scott, what's the next thing for sustainability, Cisco, but maybe what it needs to be too for the world at large?
So this is an area, as we think about, we obviously have competitors, right? When we're in selling networking technology to customers, we have competitors. There are no competitors in this space, right? All of us want the same outcome when it comes to sustainability. And so we work with common providers, we work with common suppliers. This is a space where we can actually lock arms. We compete actively for customers. We compete actively for sales. When it comes to working with the common suppliers that we all have, we actually coordinate quite well in saying, these are our expectations. And what would be hard, frankly, is if Cisco had a different set of expectations on the same provider versus some of our competitors did, right? So it's much easier for them to be compliant with what we want when we all have the same set of requirements from those common suppliers. And so what's great about this space is there are no competitors. We all are pursuing the same outcome.
Fran, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'd add just a few things. So the first is I do think we are going to see more and more of an integration of our social justice actions and climate coming together in a powerful way. When we look at our beliefs and when we look at who has been most impacted, these things come together in a very impactful way. And I think you're going to see that come together, which is good. To Scott's point, we're going to have to build the coalitions with our competitors because we know that there isn't a single company that can solve this. And then the last thing that I would say is the approach that I think we're taking with governments around the world and creating digital plans. Right now, we have about 1,000 projects in 40 countries that are driving issues around the digital divide, around sustainability. I do think this is the wave of the future, and we can use this vehicle together with our partners in industry.